Let's see here. There we go. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Julie. I'm the events manager at Roundabout Books, and tonight we are going to be doing a virtual author event with Kay Jennings, who has authored 2 different books based here in Oregon. I want to remind everyone, if you join the event after we get started, you are muted, but I'd be happy to see any questions that you have for our author in the chat. I will be passing those along, and then at the end, we'll open it up for general questions. And just to remind everyone as well, the bookstore is open right now. Our normal hours are 10 to 5 every day of the week. We're happily still doing our owl post on Thursdays, so if you're not able to come to the store but you want a book, call us. It's $1. We'll deliver it right to your door. And we're also still doing, regular delivery through the postal service. So let us know any book that you need. And obviously we will have copies of both of Kay's books. So with that, Kay, I should have had this started, and I probably did and then totally forgot. I wanted to make sure and give a good intro about your background as a writer. So hold on just one second. I'm going to get the right thing pulled up. This is the fun and not fun about virtual events is sometimes they just throw me off my game.
Yeah.
So your debut novel, Shallow Waters, came out, was it last year that you were at our local author night? Was that August?
Yes, that was in August of 2019. A lot of fun.
So you're a native Oregonian. This is your new mystery series, which is set alongside Oregon's rugged Pacific coast.
Right.
And so Port Stirling in your books is fictional. However, you live in the real town of Estacada, Oregon.
I do.
Yes. So I am really excited to hear about a little recap of Shallow Waters for everyone. It was such a great event that you did with us last year. It was such a great presentation. And then we'll talk about your new book, Midnight Beach. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Julie. This is not as much fun as doing in-person events, because I love to meet readers and talk to them and sign some books. But hey, it is what it is, and we're all going to deal with it. I want to thank anyone that's on here tonight for tearing themselves away from CNN or Fox News, OPB, whatever your media source is. I know there's a lot of, I would say, tension in the country right now. And I think the best way of dealing with that is to forget about it for a little while and read a good book. And it's mystery reading season. So I'm really glad to get my second book published and out there right now. And I want to thank you, Julie, and Roundabout Books. I had a great time over there last summer. Was really looking forward to coming back because I'm an Oregon kid and I love Bend. I love the whole Deschutes River area. So anyway, sometime once this horrible virus is gone, I'll be back over there.
Absolutely.
I am going to talk about 2 books tonight. As Julie mentioned, the first one is my book from 2019 that started this whole adventure for me, Shallow Waters. And then I'm going to talk about my brand new book, which I am happy to report is really selling well all across the country, which is just beyond my expectations when I started down this road. So I'm going to talk a little bit about both of them. One thing I neglected to mention to you, Julie, but I'm going to just stick it in here anyway, is I've got a giveaway. I've got a beautiful natural cotton tote bag with the logo of Midnight Beach on it. And I thought what I would do is, if anyone's watching this and I'm going to give my author website address. If they go to that and sign up for my newsletter, I'm going to draw a couple of names out of there tomorrow. And if they're local, Bend, Redmond, around your area, I'll send it to Roundabout Books, and they can come into the bookstore and pick up their tote bag. And if it's somebody from outside your local area, I'll get their contact info and just ship it to them directly. So a giveaway. So if you're watching out there, you want to go to www.kjenningsauthor.com. kjenningsauthor.com. You'll find my website, and there's a button someplace on it where it says, sign up here so you don't miss anything. And I do I call it my occasional newsletter. I do it whenever I have something to talk about. Lately, I've been talking about wildfires because I live in Estacada and had to evacuate my home last month, which is just about the most terrifying experience you can imagine. So I don't overwhelm people who sign up for my newsletter. I just use it to kind of talk about my writing process and any news, and a lot of times it's about gardening. I have a huge vegetable garden, and a lot of times it's more about that than writing. But if you go there, kjenningsauthor.com, and sign up, I will draw 2 names tomorrow morning, and I'll send you each just a really cool tote bag that's good to take to your favorite bookstore and bring your books home with you. My background, for those of you that I don't know, and I hope some of my buddies over in Central Oregon are on tonight, but if not, and I don't know you, as Julie said, I'm a native Oregonian. I actually grew up in Coquille, Oregon, which is in Coos County, down on the southern coastal area. And I left there, went to the University of Oregon, lived in Eugene for 25 years, and then moved up to Portland, where I've been for the last, I don't know, probably another 20 years or so. And my husband and I just left the city of Portland, where we'd lived for over a decade, and moved to Estacada, Oregon. We're now farmers, kind of. We're not real farmers, but we bought 5 beautiful acres out here with a pond and a creek, and it's just been heaven. And as it's turned out, with having to work from home, we couldn't be in a better place, and we're so happy that we moved out here last year when we did. In fact, we moved the week before I came to Roundabout to talk about shallow waters. So we haven't been here that long, but it turned out to be pretty good timing on our part. Career-wise, I've always written, but I wrote for other people. I always worked in corporate communications. I worked for companies like Nike. I worked for Oregon Tourism, business development for years. I've been a vice president of marketing for a big hospital, and I've always written, but mostly in the corporate arena. And my last job before I started writing mysteries was at a little dinky little website called Bleacher Report that was started by 2 guys from Corvallis, Oregon, because they wanted to keep up together with their favorite teams. And what happened to them is truly an American dream story. They ended up selling the company to Turner Sports for $200 million a few years ago. And it just went crazy from there. And now if you turn on, they're all over the place, all over the map now. But I worked for them. I was actually a consultant, and reported into the San Francisco headquarters. Excuse me. And I was a sports writer. I wrote about football. First I was the Oregon Ducks football columnist, and then I was the Pac-12 football columnist, and then they moved me into the NFL, and I covered helping younger other writers and was kind of an editor, and then I would write a few things too. And so that was great. But then they got so big and they got to the point where I couldn't really help the writers anymore because they were so darn good. They started hiring sports writers from the New York Times and Dallas Morning News. And so when that contract went away, I thought, this is my chance to write what I want to write. And I've always loved mysteries. And that I had an idea. And the reason I'm going to talk about both books a little bit is because they are, on some level, related. It is a series. And my main character, who is the police chief of a small town called Port Stirling, which in reality is Bandon, Oregon, if you know Bandon. And it's very thinly disguised, that whole area, Bandon, Coos Bay, Coquille, where I grew up. I just decided it would be easier to write about a setting I knew, and then it turned out that the setting was absolutely perfect to write murder mysteries. And the other way they're connected is both of these books are, the first one's really very loosely inspired by something that happened in Coos County years ago, kind of in my childhood. And the second one, Midnight Beach, is very strongly inspired by a real life event and a real crime. And I had even the sheriff of Coos County now was actually involved in the crime that is at the heart of Midnight Beach. And I, of course, because it's fiction and I like to make up stuff, I added a lot to it. But the essential crime that takes place in Midnight Beach actually happened in Bandon, Oregon in 1977. So if you like true crime, go look up the Sigali drug raid of 1977, Cigale. That's the name of a ship. And that'll give you a clue where Midnight Beach is going and kind of what it's all about. The third book, which I've just started writing, and I'm really getting into it right now, and it's going very well, is not related to any real life event. I just had this idea one day about what should happen next with my characters. It is a series. These same characters follow through. And I would think I was also inspired with book 3 by Mother Nature and natural disasters. It's too raw for me to write about wildfires because that was such a terrifying experience. But it got me thinking about Mother Nature and what could happen. And when you talk about the Oregon coast, there is something that is likely to happen there at some point in time if we all live long enough. And that inspired the third book that I'm writing on right now, which I'm not going to really, I don't know why I'm off on this. I'm not going to talk about it because I'm not that far along, but it's been a lot of fun so far. And I actually think number 3 is going to come out maybe as early as February, because it is rolling right along. It's really good. I've got my cover designer, and I want to talk about that too a little bit. This great cover has been getting a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And it's when you're self-published like I am, a cover is important to any book. It's how it gets noticed the first time. It's got to be sort of genre specific, and my genre, of course, is murder mysteries. But it's got to have something else. It's got to have some pizzazz. And I found out, my editor put me on to this graphic designer. She lives in Midtown Manhattan, and in an apartment where she is now during COVID with her husband and homeschooling two kids. So it was a rocky summer and process here. But my cover designer, Claire Brown is her name. She worked at Random House in New York for several years, and she just left there because she wanted to work with indie authors like me. And I was very lucky to get her. She is just a dynamite designer. And she gave me, when we first started working on Midnight Beach, she gave me 8 options she sent on the first design. And I could have chosen any one of the 8. They were that good. She just completely nailed it. So look for it at Roundabout Beach, Roundabout Books. It looks great facing out on a shelf. So, and it's really helped me to market the book across the country. Libraries are buying it. Bookstores in all parts of the country seem to be interested. So I'm real pleased with how it's going so far. So, any questions so far?
You know, I have one.
Go.
Since you mentioned that the first book, the mystery underneath, you know, the plot is fictional, but the second one is based on real events. Did you find it hard to fictionalize real events? Which one is easier, making it up or like being inspired by real events?
I don't know, Julie. That's kind of tough. The reason I wrote Shallow Waters was because a story had been going around in my head forever and ever and ever. And every time I would go to Bandon and I would walk on the beach and I would get to a certain place on the beach, I would think about this story. And it was actually my husband who first said, "Why don't you write this thing? It's a really good story." And so I thought, okay. But if you've read Shallow Waters, you'll know it's a very sensitive subject. And so I had to change virtually everything in it. The people in particular, the details of the crime and all that. I had to really change it a lot. So that part was kind of difficult. Now that I'm on writing my third book, it's actually easier. I don't know why. I just have this very vivid imagination, and I just imagine this natural disaster happening, and how would my characters react to it. Now that I know my characters, I think it's actually easier to start with a totally made up fictional idea, because you can just go wherever you want. Right. With Midnight Beach, I felt like I had an obligation to some of the people. There are still people alive that were involved in the real crime in 1977, and a lot of them are either still in law enforcement or retired. And I'm very happy to say I just got a note from one of them who lives in Coos County still, and he said, "For fiction, you got a lot right." And so I thought that was kind of a nice thing too. But I think it's really harder. I think from now on, although now I've got people feeding me real crimes, and they'd say, "Hey, did you hear about this one in 1962? You ought to look at this," and all that. And I am doing that because that's where a lot of the gems come from. But this third book that's going so smoothly for me right now, I think it's because it's all up here, and it's real life, it's fiction.
Yeah, that's good. Well, can you tell us a little bit about the main character? Like what you know, what he's like, what you know, he's got going on.
You have to remember, when I started this, it was like, I guess about 2.5 years ago now. And my main character, I decided when I first started writing Shallow Waters, I thought it was going to be about the murder and the family. And certainly that's a huge part of it. But I also got to thinking about somebody has to solve this crime. Somebody's got to figure out what went on here and get justice for the victim. And so I came up with this character. His name is Matt Horning, and he is from Dallas, Texas. He's lived in Dallas his whole life. His family owns a huge ranch in Texas, and he was a detective in the Plano, Texas Police Department. But he ran into some trouble one night through things that just happen to cops sometimes. And this happened to be no fault of his own, but he really ran into a sticky wicket. And so it became clear that it was time for him to move on. And a friend of his, a former football teammate of his, knew about an opening in a small town in Oregon. And Matt Horning didn't even know where that was. He had to look it up on the map because he's spent his whole life in Texas and traveled some, but hadn't been out to the West Coast. And long story short, he got the job as police chief. The old police chief was retiring. And so he came out here where he knew no one. The food was different. Certainly the weather was different. Everything about it was different for him. So he had a period of adjustment, and he had this baggage with him of what had happened to him in the Plano Police Department. And so he came out here, he started fresh, and the day he arrived, Port Stirling has its first homicide in over 20 years. And he had to jump right in and deal with it. And it was a particularly horrifying crime. And the community was, as you would imagine, in a town that size. And in my mind, Port Stirling is about 3,000 people. It's a small Oregon coastal village. You all know what they look like. And he had to really rise to the occasion. He's a good guy. He's very thoughtful. He cares about people. He's relatively young, early 40s to be a chief of police, but it is a small town department. He's very hunky. He was a cornerback in the NFL, and he's a good-looking guy. He's divorced. His wife thought she was marrying an NFL player, and he blew out his knee almost immediately and turned to police work. And so the wife was not crazy about being a cop's wife. It wasn't what she bargained for. And so he's divorced, and so he shows up in this little town, and he's immediately a sensation. For hopefully in the end the right reasons, but in the beginning it's a little dicey. And I grew really attached to him by the end of the first book. I had never planned to write a series, but then I had quite a bit of success with Shallow Waters, and I missed the characters after a while, and that's why I wrote Midnight Beach during this last spring and summer and into fall. And interestingly enough, in book 3, the ex-wife reappears. And that's all I'm going to say. And that, I have to say, came out of nowhere about 2 days ago in my head. I was like, what's she doing here? Anyway, so he's a good guy. I feel a little responsibility now with everything going on across the country with the police, particularly in Portland, Oregon, and other places, that I'm real careful about how Matt is now handling himself and dealing with his responsibilities, and how he reacts to the world around him and what's going on. But he is at heart, he's one of the good guys.
That's good. And I always love to hear that your characters have more to talk about, right? Like when you see a series and, you know, you always want to have your reader go, oh, what are they going to do next? You know,
Yeah.
and that's a nice thing with a series, is to get invested in the characters as well. So that's nice to hear that you are, you know, hearing them as well and what they want to
Oh
tell.
yeah. Oh, totally. And it's why I think most writers too who write series, and certainly I would say this, I like people to start with Shallow Waters. If you haven't read it, go to Roundabout Books, get it first, read it first, because what we writers in series try to do is grow the characters. I mean, things have to happen, especially in a mystery. The mystery genre, suspense, thriller, which is where I write in. Um, if nothing happens, you don't have a story,
Right.
and so things need to keep happening. But the other thing that I'm really trying hard to do is grow the characters. If they don't kind of naturally change a little bit, um, I don't really. Some writers might say, well, that's consistency. My characters don't change, they're consistent in their action. To me, that means they're kind of stagnant, and I don't want that to happen. So quite a bit happens to the main relationships between my main character Matt and my secondary characters. Quite a bit happens between Shallow Waters and Midnight Beach, and it's going to be even, they're going to really have some movement, I would say, in book 3, because they're dealing with a natural disaster. And I will tell you, the hint is there is a decades old murder that is discovered in the aftermath of the natural disaster. So he's got a lot, and then he's got relationship issues. So there's kind of a lot going on. And I think you're right, Julie. If you don't give people, if they're not asking what's going to happen next, there's no reason to keep reading. So when the best review I get, when I get my reviews online mainly, is it was a page turner, it kept me up, yay. That's what I want.
Yeah.
That's what you try to achieve. Yeah.
Yeah, I always think back to I was a mystery reader from the start. I don't know if this was probably necessarily a healthy thing, but I think I started reading adult mystery books by the time I was in 6th grade. And I was addicted to Patricia Cornwell and Mary Higgins.
Yeah.
And I always loved, especially Patricia Cornwell's series, the one with the medical examiner and you know, they're very similar to Kathy Reichs and the Temperance Brennan ones, but there was something about that Patricia Cornwell series. The main character does grow so much. Like, you know, bad things happen to them that you're kind of like, man, why do bad things keep happening to this person?
I know. I know, and you really do. And I like those series too. I tend to read a lot of British mystery writers. They invented it. Let's be honest. They invented the whole genre.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm hooked on one right now. I'll tell you. I don't know if you have it in the bookstore or not yet, but it's an English writer named Ellie Griffiths. And she has written, what I'm reading right now is a Ruth Galloway series. And this series, you have to start with book 1, because I can't believe what she's done with these 2 or 3 main characters. It's just remarkable. It's very good writing. It's very clever. Yes, there's a murder mystery, but when I pick up the next one, I want to know what happens to Ruth next. And so that's, you know, you learn a lot when, if you read a lot, you learn more. And so I have a bunch of authors that write in the same genre as I do, and I really try to keep up with them. And almost every time I learn something, some little nuance, or a way to kind of move the character forward a little bit. I think it's real important. So, yeah.
Were you or are you a true crime reader, or are you more mystery fiction?
I'm more fiction. I will. I have some really good loyal reader fans that say, "Gee, we just want you to write true crime. Go. Go. There's so much going on." And when I first started with Shallow Waters, I called um, a local cop that I know, and he sent me to a friend of his who is an Oregon State Police trooper and has been around forever and ever. And when I told him what I was doing, I was writing, it was going to be a fictional Coos County, he just started laughing and he said, "Boy, lady, if you picked a good county, there's a lot of crime down there."
Yeah.
And so I keep getting all these leads from my old high school buddies and everybody saying, "Hey, did you hear about this one?" But I just, personally, I like to read fiction more. I'll occasionally, pick up something true crime, because there are some um, I don't know why, but Oregon seems to have a a draw for the weirdos, because there's some real interesting true crime out there. But at least I think, especially since March and April, when we've been home with COVID, I have about 22 books on my nightstand right now, and I would say probably half of them are British murder mysteries, and it's what I like. It's the genre I like. I read nonfiction as well. I'm real interested. I've got a couple coming up here that I'm really interested in reading, but generally speaking, true crimes, it's not for me. I guess it's too real.
Yeah. There's a podcast I listen to that does recaps of horrible things, murders mostly. But they do always joke about how much there is in the Pacific Northwest. If you include Washington, it's kind of crazy. So yeah,
you can make a living on this for sure. And I'm not ruling it out, because a friend of mine who lives in Gold Beach, Oregon, sent me a tip the other day, and I thought, well, that's an interesting one. It was a crime I'd never heard about here, but I think it's more fun to invent stuff. I just do.
Yeah, and I mean, it's also, getting to be creative about, the crime, or what bad guy did, or who the bad guy is. Do you have anything from the new book, a little excerpt that you could read for us?
I do. I was just going to suggest that. I've got, I have a couple marked off here, but I want to give people a feel for Midnight Beach and how it starts, because I'm not doing it the very, very beginning. It starts off, chapter 1 is called The Body, and it starts off like I think a good mystery should, with a dead person. And if you have read Shallow Waters, you'll probably recognize the name that is in the first sentence of Midnight Beach. So I didn't want to do that in case people hadn't read Shallow Waters. I didn't want to give it away, but there is a character in Shallow Waters that turns out to be a red herring in it. And this person has an unfortunate beginning in Midnight Beach. But so it's just a little bit after the body has been discovered. And Matt Horning, my chief of police, it's early in the morning and he's home. He's just gone out to run on the beach, and he's had a little bit of breakfast, and he's getting ready to go to work. It's a Tuesday, I believe, if I recall. No, I'm sorry, it's a Friday. It's Friday, April 5th. And so here's Matt Horning. Towel drying his hair, Matt stepped out onto the white terry bath rug just as his phone jingled on the vanity. He hesitated for a split second because at 7:20 a.m. it was a little early for a phone call, and it must be something bad. Just like a cop, imagine the worst, he thinks. He jumped for the phone, answered, and heard silence, then a cough on the other end. Chief, this is Milton, the 911 dispatcher up at City Hall, finally said the caller. Hi, Milton. I remember you. What can I do for you on this beautiful Friday morning? Well, you're not going to believe this. I don't believe this. Milton pushed his black frames up. They kept sliding down his nose. What is it, son? Just got a call from a county bird counter. Says he found a body and a head, Milton choked out. Sorry, I'm not tracking that. Please say it again. Matt held the phone closer to his ear. This guy says he's out near Twisty River and he found a dead person. Only the head and the body are separated. I see, said Matt slowly. Where is he? Do you know that wildlife refuge close to where the Twisty feeds into the ocean? That's where he is. He's scared shitless. I've got him holding on the other line. What should I do, Chief? This is important, Milton, and you're doing great. Tell him to stay put, don't touch anything, and watch for my city police car. I'll be there in under 10. 10 minutes, sir? Yes, 10 minutes. Please tell him to wave when he sees my car, okay? Oh, and tell him to not call anyone else. Got it, Milton said and hung up. Matt threw down his towel and grabbed the first pair of jeans and a sweater he could find. He snatched his badge, his briefcase, and his jacket off its hook near the front door. Just before he reached for the doorknob, he jogged back into his bedroom and unlocked the Colt 1911 pistol with its box elder burl custom grip from the small safe deep in the closet. Then he ran for his police car parked in the gravel driveway in front of his house. His unfinished bowl of yogurt sat forlornly on the kitchen table. So off he goes. We've got a body with a decapitated head 4 feet away from it.
Yeah, sounds like they don't get on a regular basis in that city.
Yeah. That's part of this one is the first story in Shallow Waters could have happened anywhere in any community. And when you read it, you'll understand why I said that. Midnight Beach, the crime in this one is could not have happened in any community. Port Stirling was chosen for a reason here, and that's what my police department has to figure out. And there may be, the federal government may be involved in this one too. I don't want to give it all away, but this is the kind of story that when I grew up there, I had no idea this kind of stuff was going on where I lived. And it's a pretty remarkable story when you read about the 1977 real life event that still almost holds a record on the West Coast today. And it happened in Bandon, Oregon. So yeah, so there was a lot to work with. I added a development that would make it more current time, something that's a little more likely to be occurring now in this kind of a situation. And of course, I embellished it quite a bit. But the heart of the real 1977 story is it could be just a great true crime book on its own.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of fun with it, but I also was trying to be respectful of the people that are still around that participated. One of which is the current Coos County Sheriff, who was a rookie cop when this happened, and he spent 5 hours laying on his belly in the wet sand on the beach that night. So there was just a lot to draw from, and I think it's a good story. It's rough. There are parts of it where, you know, this is not a cozy mystery.
Right.
I will say that this is got a lot more grit to it, I think. The subject matter is not as difficult as Shallow Waters was. But this one has a lot of grit, and it's real life. So if you can't take it, I mean, it's not overdone by any means. And I try to keep in mind who some of my readers are, who I've been lucky enough to get around the Northwest and meet a lot of them in the last year and a half. And I try to keep some of them in mind when I'm writing. But you have to go where the story takes you to. And these are, you know, they're real cops and real bad guys. So,
yeah. Well, excellent. I think both of these books are going to make great, you know, holiday gifts for people who like mysteries, you know, who might be harder to shop for. And on that note, if you come into Roundabout and buy them both, we have free gift wrapping.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, the covers are so great, and you know, there is this misperception sometimes still that self-published books are not well-written books, and that's not true. You know, you are one of those people that shows you have a story, you go through an editor, you have a designer. I mean, you are your own little publishing company, and
Yep.
you're putting out great books. So I really think that that's such a good, I love that it's open now in that sense that you get your book out and you don't have to wait for somebody else.
That's a really good point, Julie, and I appreciate you saying that. And I would say I've been, over the last year or so, talking to the crime book reviewer at the New York Times, and she had never ever reviewed a self-published book. They work with all the traditional publishers. It's a little bit of a game, but I was very happy to see in science fiction now and in YA and fantasy, the New York Times is reviewing self-published books now. Now, I haven't seen Marilyn Stasio, who I've been after until she's probably sick of me, but I think the tide has turned. You get approached once you have a little success with the first book. You get approached by some literary agents and maybe some smaller publishers. But it's what you said. I'm a control freak, and I was an editor, so I know how to put out a quality book. And I just had to get the help from the pieces of it that I can't do myself, which is the graphic design and working with a developmental editor to make sure I wasn't missing, you know, something important. But I could not have done this, I don't think, even 5 years ago to this degree of success. But it's set up now so well that you work with a major printer like Ingram, who does all of the books that you have probably, and the libraries, and so you can get the distribution now. Even the big published houses now require their authors to do a lot of the marketing, like we're doing right now.
Right.
You still have to do that yourself, even if you're a fairly famous author, which I'm certainly not. But that part of it, I guess I'm a little luckier because I've worked in PR and marketing for my professional career. So that part of it comes a little easier to me than to some. But it's just about putting out a quality product and then hopefully people recognize that. And I think that's happened with my first book. And so it's leading to some pretty good success here, I think, for number 2 as well. So
Yeah.
it's great.
Well, I'm so happy to hear that. And, you know, independent bookstores are here to help out independent authors as well as, you know, best-selling authors. You know, obviously we have those books, but I really enjoy having books by Oregon-based authors, whether they're in Bend or, you know, closer to Portland. Just, it shows, you know, how much creativity we have in our state, and I'm really proud of that. So
It is, well, and that's a two-way street. I have a button on my website that says, click here to find the closest independent bookstore for you. You put in your zip code and the independent bookstores in your area will pop up. And I really encourage that. Obviously, any author today, we have to work with the 800-pound gorilla. Especially on ebooks, which are you know, popular as well. But I really, gosh, I hope we get through this whole COVID thing and don't lose many of our bookstores. We've had one in Portland already that I did a reading at last summer that shut down. That was really sad. So if you're watching, go into Roundabout tomorrow and buy Shallow Waters and Midnight Beach, and then get a couple more books off their shelves for your holiday gifts too. It's important.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are supporting their local bookstores and just local shops in general. So I really appreciate that people around here, you know, care and shop local that way. So yeah, I mean, we're doing great at the bookstore. I'm so happy to have spent this time with you talking about your 2 books. I already have a list of a couple people in my head who are going to get them for Christmas, because we are a family of mystery readers in my family. So
that's great.
yeah.
That's great. Just one other quick thing I want to say too. When I started approaching bookstores across the country, I start with a list that kind of specialize in mystery and suspense. And I honestly, when I started doing this last month, I thought I'm going to run into a lot of closed independent bookstores here. It's just going to be awful, but I tried to prepare myself for it. And so far, I've probably talked to maybe about 110 bookstores across the country. 2 of them are closed. All the rest of them are what you're saying. People are coming in, they're stocking up. If they have to pick them up, books at the curb, they're doing that. But I think people understand what's at stake here, and not just bookstores, but all of our local businesses. We have to really, you know, pitch in and support them now. So keep going.
Thank you. You as well. I'm very excited to hear about book 3. Keep me posted. Obviously, we'll have you back, whether it's in person or on Zoom again. So just to remind everybody, give the bookstore a phone call, 541-306-6564, or find us online. It's roundaboutbookshop.com. There happens to be a Roundabout Books in another state, so you have
there is. I found them.
Yes. So you have to make sure roundaboutbookshop.com to find us in beautiful Bend, Oregon.
Yeah, and kjenningsauthor.com. Sign up for my newsletter, and maybe you'll win a really cool tote bag in the next day or 2. Awesome. Thanks, Julie.
Okay, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here tonight, and I cannot wait to read what you write next.
Okay, thanks a lot. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, absolutely.